We're going to talk about Loris Karius now. David Preece is on the line to talk to us a little bit about what happens now. But before we get to what the future holds for Loris Karius, what was your assessment of how the errors happened the other night, David?
I think that the one thing that stood out for me really, and that makes the mistakes a little bit more baffling, was that he looked confident throughout the game. It wasn't a nervy performance by him. We'd seen that in the past, certainly last season, but he seemed to have eradicated that from his game this year, and the confidence shown him by Klopp, it was returned in full, and he's looked every inch the keeper thought he was going to buy, and yeah, that first goal, it's something that will never happen again for him. He's in the team because his distribution is excellent. He sets attacks off very quickly, and obviously, if he gets the ball past Benzema, then they've got a numerical advantage further up the field, and which they can exploit. I think you've probably got to give credit to Benzema in this case as well, because he doesn't switch off. He doesn't allow the easy ball to go past him, and he reacts well just to stick out a leg and direct it goalwards. But it's just one of those where he just misjudged the situation.
So you don't really blame him too much for that. Shaka Hislop was saying that this was a guy who was a little bit lost in the occasion and who was trying a little bit too hard as opposed to just maybe playing the game, the actual magnitude of a European Cup final. Did you buy that part for that goal?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with Shaka to a certain extent, where it's you can see that in cases like this, and you see it often in training sessions where a goalkeeper, he's one step ahead all the time. Sometimes you've got to be like that. So sometimes you're already thinking about the throw before you've concentrated on the action of just securing the ball. So certainly with it, especially the second goal, that might be in the case. But it's one of those where, like I said, if you're one step ahead and you're thinking too much about the next step in the process, you lose your focus a little bit, and I probably agree with them there with that one.
And so that seems to be the general acceptance of what happened in the second situation, is that he's already thinking about, okay, I've got to get this out now, I've got to make sure that I'm finding a pass or I'm restarting a play better than I have done before, and instead of just catching and concentrating on where the ball is, he loses the flight because he's already thinking about what comes next.
Well, the ball is moving, it's dipping towards him, but it's not a late vicious deviation of the ball, so it's kind of one that you can pick up the flight of it and read it pretty easily, and ordinarily it's a ball. It's not just that it's a savable ball; it is a catchable ball, and I know that his manager Jurgen Klopp sort of came out afterwards and said that the two errors were linked, but like I said, I probably disagree about the occasion getting to him simply because the rest of his performance, especially, look, the first action he made in the first few minutes was coming out and dominating his box and punching a ball away, and he had 2 or 3 really good saves in the game. He had a great save from Ronaldo in between the 2 goals as well. So I didn't see that his whole performance was affected by either the mistakes or the occasion, really.
Okay, that's interesting, because I just thought that the general consensus after this would be Liverpool need to move on and buy somebody who doesn't have this in their game. But from what you're saying, it sounds like actually this is a teaching moment, a very, very difficult, high-profile global calamity in terms of how he's going to be perceived. But actually, it is something that he can learn from and perhaps be a useful goalkeeper for Liverpool again.
Yeah, I certainly think so. The difficulty he's got at the moment is that he's got almost 2 months now to dwell on this. I think to move on and recover and to start his rehabilitation, he'd need to get back into training sessions. You can get back into training sessions, you can work out your frustrations, you can work hard, get a little bit of anger out of you, because there'll be a lot of sort of self-flagellation. He'd be beating himself over this a lot, and then move on with get into the next game. But the way he's got to look at it as a challenge, because it's almost like recovering from an injury and coming through rehabilitation for that. You've got to work your way through it and see it as a challenge and spend that time leading up to recovery. And I think that as long as he sees it that way, and by no means it's a massive challenge that comes in front of him, because if he does play against Liverpool, and he goes to an away ground, he's going to be target for a lot of sticks. So he's that's another thing that he's going to have to come across, get over in the process.
Yeah, for sure, and that's very true as well when you think about it from Jurgen Klopp's perspective as well. And a lot of this is to do with optics. Jurgen Klopp kind of has to be seen to be doing something about his goalkeeping situation this summer, doesn't he?
Well, I think it was always going to be the case. I'd imagine that Simon Mignolet wasn't going to hang around to be number 2 again for next season. I think he knows his days are numbered. So it was always on the agenda to bring a goalkeeper in, but I think Jurgen Klopp had thought that it was less of a pressing priority after the way that Karius had been performing, but now it's right back at the top of the agenda again.
Was there anything else then in terms of positioning? Like, did he get his hips in the wrong place, or any of that kind of just the technical stuff that you think, oh, that's something that you need to work on? Or, like, is it purely a concentration issue for the second goal in particular?
I mean, for that second goal, technically it's a mess, really. The only things that should be moving in that situation, when the ball's directly at him, should be his eyes and his arms. If he just gets his hands above the ball, so it's like I said, slightly above the ball, then even if he does have a misjudgment in handling, then the ball will drop in front of him. He's not anchored to the floor at all. He's kind of jumped to try and get himself over the top of the ball, and like I said, it just looks a mess from start to finish, really. And it's one of those things. If he just stood there and just tried to bat the ball away, then it's a simple save for him.
It seems like kind of almost simple tips there that should have been worked on the training ground, and it comes back to this idea that it is just a forgetfulness of the actual basics of goalkeeping. It sounds like it, David, because I would assume that Loris Karius or somebody of his level playing for Liverpool would be almost insulted if you were to actually instruct him on that level ahead of a game like a Champions League final.
Yeah, of course, and I think that what I thought initially, especially sort of last season, you looked at his game and some of the goals he was conceding. There looked like a real anxiety in his game, and you're right. It looked like he'd forgotten all the basics that you need in goalkeeping, and for me that's what it's all about. You do the simple things well, and then your talent takes you above that. But I think he's certainly his anxiety will have been ramped up after that goal, and of course, there was a little bit of redemption from when Mane scored, but as soon as that goal goes in from Bale, the second goal, and he's put on the back foot again. He's maybe thinking negatively, saying that it might be his fault that they're going to lose the Champions League final. Then, like I said, it's just the little bit of anxiety creeps back into his game again.
So emotionally, how does he recover from this? And like, what's the best thing for him? Is it to try and stick around and win his place next year, even knowing that the whole team feels like he cost them a Champions League? Or is the best thing to go somewhere else, away perhaps even from the Premier League, where this will be remembered again and again and again every time he plays?
Look, from my point of view, I think it'd be a mistake to run away and go somewhere else. I know there's a lot of people saying this morning that's what he has to do to move on, but I don't see that. If he leaves Liverpool this summer, which I honestly can't see him doing that, but if he does leave this summer, then it'll always be there. It will always be hanging around in the background, and even the fact that he didn't try and rectify it and try and put things right, that will just be even more of a burden on him, I think, and more of a sort of shadow over him. So I think the best thing for him to do now is to get on with things. He won't be able to forget it this summer. It'll be sort of eating away at him all summer until they get back pre-season training. And then, like I said, it's a challenge, and he has to work through this. And just by working hard, and he'll need the support of his friends and family, and obviously his coaches around him to help him move on as well. But I think that's the best thing for him now, just to get back into training in pre-season and try and start over and work towards recovery again.
One last thing before we let you go, David, is around the World Cup and England squad. It's obviously been there's been a lot of headlines really around the goalkeeping situation, but that's mainly due to the Joe Hart situation. What's your read on how this is going to go in terms of who Gareth Southgate is going to pick as his number one for the World Cup?
I think it's probably clear that Jordan Pickford will be the number one, simply because he fits into the way that Gareth Southgate wants to play even more. You've seen in the game that he played against the Netherlands, he's You know, there was a long ball. He came out of the box. He was nice, calm, relaxed. Played a simple ball in the build-up as they played out from the back, and they scored from it. And it kind of just cemented the fact why he should be number one. I think Gareth Southgate will continue with that, and I think it was the right decision not to take Joe Hart as well. You know, I think people were talking about the experience that he might be able to lend the younger keepers, but again, I think he's someone who's had bad experiences in big tournaments before, and I think he would have just been a reminder of those bad experiences for the young keepers. So I'm glad that Nick Pope has got there because he deserves it as well.
David, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Cheers, gents.